Hi everybody, it's Crazy. It's Monday, and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now we are up to chapter 30, but before I get started, gotta give a shout out to my trusted, because you guys rock. To my Crazy fam, I love you guys. And to my patrons, thank you for your continued support. Now, we left off last week with architecture. Whoops, wrong one. There we go, architecture. This basically talks about the logic brick system, and it breaks it down in a little bit more detail so you can get to understand it. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, let's go right up to here and we say, okay, the game engine was designed to revolve around game objects. 15 years ago, when it was first developed, actually it's been way more than 15 years, this was a breakthrough design. The idea of having events controlled per object as opposed to a central controller worked well for the early days of 3D engines. Nowadays, some people may advocate that controlling elements per object is less scalable and more difficult to manage. That will be up to you to decide. Regardless of your thoughts on the subject, the game engine still allows you to emulate a centralized controlling system while giving autonomy to each object to deal with its own business. Part of this flexibility is due to the hooked up Python layer and the logic brick system. Through the Python interface, you can replace or at least control most of the effects and logic setups you create with logic bricks. With logic bricks, you can quickly set up a system that is easy to visualize, implement, and test. The strength of the game engine comes from the trade-off between the two sibling systems. A flexible design may lack features and performance compared to specific engines. Nevertheless, the different kinds of applications you can prototype and develop quickly with the game engine make up for the compromise. If you look at a level deep into the object structure, you will find that the architecture of the logic brick system is controller centric. Okay, it it revolves. Yeah, revolves. Yeah, okay, revolves around the controllers of the game because they are the ones to determine it's supposed to be what to do with the sensors and what actuators to activate. This doesn't have to be followed strictly, but based on this design, you will want to keep your sensors and actuators to a minimum and optimize their usage with the controllers. Actually, in order to optimize the performance, the game engine disables any sensor and actuator that is unlinked to a controller or linked to a controller in a non-active state. This is one of the many reasons why Python controllers are so popular. They allow you to replace the use of multiple sensors and actuators by direct calls to their equivalents in the source code. Chapter 7, Python scripting, is entirely dedicated to that aspect of the game engine and will complement the applications of logic bricks discussed in this chapter. Alright, so now we're up to the interface. Okay, so logic bricks has its own editor inside the Blender interface. Okay, so let's switch over to here. Okay, so logic bricks, as you've seen in an earlier demonstration of this of a game that we did using some logic bricks, just right here is your interface. Okay, while other game settings are spread all over the panels, okay, these panels here, all kinds, okay, and menus, editing logic bricks can be done entirely inside the logic editor. You can see that logic bricks are sorted per object, okay, so camera, even lights you can have with logic bricks, okay, and organized according to your own needs. Okay, we're going to switch back over to here. For each individual object, the controllers are executed from top to bottom, okay, as presented in the interface. Nevertheless, there is not much control as to which of the object's logic bricks runs first. The criteria of organization for logic bricks tends to reflect more personal preferences and visual clarity needs than internal requirements. Here are some instructions on how to use the logic brick editor interface. Okay, just a note, for those used to the Blender 2.49 interface, okay, you may need some time to get used to the enhanced new design of Blender. Now, this is actually talking about the 2.5 version, because after 2.49, they went to a area like this, and then as 2.6 progressed and 2.7 progressed, this became more refined. And now that you've got 2.8, okay, actually 2.9 now, it's actually a completely different interface again. So you're not looking at the same stuff that you used to see in the Blender 2.7 series. And back in the 2.4 series, it didn't look like this either. this was considered the new interface. The old interface was basically a web interface, if I remember correctly. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is that the physics panel has been moved to the physics tab on the properties logic editor, which is over here, and it is right there. There's your physics. Okay. Now, let's see. The physics tab at the properties of logic bricks. Okay, so I guess that's these right here now. And you can add components. Okay, well, I guess it's a little bit different than this, because this is not the same anymore. The physics properties still have to be done here and no longer in here, I guess. If you've jumped straight into this chapter and are a bit lost navigating the Blender interface, then chapter 1 should help you find your intended UI element. Okay, so basically we're going to be working in this area here. We're not going to be using any physics or anything like that right now. This, of course, this is your 3D window. If you don't know what you're looking at and you're just tuned into these videos, I suggest you go back to the very first one and get yourself acquainted with the Blender 2.7 interface. Okay, it's very frustrating when you dive into something halfway in and you don't know what you're doing, and you're standing there scratching your head going, what okay, these are logic bricks. Okay, what does this panel do? What do these panels do? What does that panel do? Go to the very first video and watch through chapter 1 and learn a bit about the interface. I did do this for you. Okay, so now the add, okay, which is add, and add. Okay, so you get an add actuator, or accent sensor, controller, and actuator. Okay, to add new logic bricks, it is only possible for the active object. Okay, so in other words, I can't go over here and activate this one and then come back to this one and it still be here unless I have them linked. Okay, and I'll talk more about that later. Okay, you see this one always displayed as the first in the logic brick list. You can see the add sensor, controller, and actuator button right after the name of the active object on its respective column. Okay, so basically cube, add sensor, cube, controller, cube, actuator. Okay, now if you already know all about this, then you're kind of standing there falling asleep. I do apologize, but this is for people who are trying to learn this. So I'm going through this, and this gives you more in depth. We're going to go really in depth into how the logic system works. Okay, when you click the button, okay, a pop-up list will show you all the available logic bricks that are compatible with this kind of object. For example, okay, armature will not show up on this, okay, unless you have an armature like a bone. So if I hit Shift A, add armature, single bone. Now if you see armature, now guess what pops up here? Okay, you're going to have armature stuff. Whoops, there it is, right there, see? Now, if we go over to here, okay, there's no armature. All right, just wanted to show y'all that. Okay, let's see. Selecting the desired type will create a new logic brick with the default parameters for this particular type, which you will likely need to change. Okay, so if you add a sensor, let's say we add a keyboard sensor. Okay, now this is for your keyboard. All right, so you have to change these around. You can make it true triggering. You got to say what kind it is. So let's make it space bar, so on and so forth. You got to set these up. They come default. If I delete that and do it again, it's not going to remember that one there. So it's per each. Okay. The name of the logic brick is automatically created based on this type for pure convenience. So when you pick a keyboard, it says keyboard. But if you wanted to make it a space bar, okay, say it's space, okay, and then you click here and you hit the space bar. When you close this out, now you know it's a keyboard, and that's the space bar that you got to hit in order to make this sensor trigger. Okay. Quick ways to add a logic brick. A quick alternative, you can use the add menu in the logic brick header bar, or pressing Shift A while the mouse pointer is in the logic brick editor. So if I hit Shift and A, I can do a sensor, I can do a controller, and I can do an actuator. All right there for you. Okay, you can also do it from the logic editor add bar right here. That shows you, oh, no, sorry, wrong one, right here. Okay, actuator, controller, sensor, okay? So you can get them from right here, or the same thing you can do in this window. If you hit Shift A, you get all the add stuff. You can do it here also in the logic editor, okay? In order to delete individual logic bricks, you need to click the X icon in the corner, okay? That is in the header of each logic brick, okay? So it's this header right here. That's the logic brick, okay? Now, the header is called this part right here. This right here is your menus. So when you hit this, all you see is the header, okay? See, by doing this, you are unlinking each logic brick with any connected logic bricks and removing it. So, just add another one. Say you add an extra keyboard. Oh, I didn't want this keyboard, but I had it linked to a action actuator. Okay, it's nothing on it, but say I messed up and it was supposed to be this one that gets locked to it. Okay, I can sever it by hitting Control and cutting across it, or I can just delete it, or I can uncheck it. Okay, that's something that a lot of people don't know, that if you undo this or undo this, it will not make this actuator work because it has nothing connected to it. Even though this one's activated and this one's activated, it's like I did that. Okay? It does the same thing. And another shortcut is you can drag this straight across and do that as well. A lot of people don't know that, but you can get rid of stuff by just clicking on the X's. Okay? Although this action can be reverted with undo / Control Z, you can bring them all back. Same thing as you can undo in this. The same amount of times you can do it in this too. Okay? Simply unlinking a logic brick or moving it to an inactive state for controllers is enough to disable it. So you can actually have a controller and you can move it, okay, to a different state. That's a state here. Okay, so I believe you can, I'm not sure about this. No, doesn't have that button. But if you go to this state, you can move it to this state. Okay. And then once it should disappear if I go back to this one. No, I can't remember exactly how it works, but we're going to get into states a little bit later on. But usually you can just deactivate here or just exit out of it. And there's also a checkbox button that sets the active state of the sensor, okay, which I just showed you. Unclick this, okay, and it will not show it. The game engine will not compute unlinked and disabled logic bricks. Thus, it will be handy to have testing sensors and actuators hanging around for later use or with no performance impact. Okay. Now, linking. Every logic brick has a connector used to link it with other logic bricks. Sensors show the connector on the right side of their header. Okay. While actuators show it on, let's see, I lost my place, sorry about that. While actuators show it on the left side, which is right here. Yes, you can do them backwards, okay? Dragging the connector from the logic brick and drop it in the connector you want to link to. So do this, you can link it to there, and you can do from both. A lot of people rather put their own and in and then connect it up because there's actually two things that they're going to connect to the and controller, but that's okay. And that's what the next part says. It says kill two birds with one stone, linking an and controller. Okay. Yeah, I just did it twice. All right, trying to link a sensor directly with the an actuator on the same object, Blender will automatically create an and controller and link it between them. So, as you've seen before, ta-da! You got an and controller. You don't need to keep the logics self-contained in single objects. When you select more than one object at a time, you will see all of them in the logic editor. So if, for example, I wanted to add that bone to it. Now, as you see, my armature and my cube are both in the same. So now I can just take an and controller, okay, and I can make a armature, or make do a keyboard controller. Actually, matter of fact, I can link that same keyboard up to that and controller, and I can make that armature move. Let's do a motion. Now, whenever I'm playing an animation, that motion will trigger at the same time when I hit the space bar. But these are two different objects. So if I click back on this one, it will still show the armature. It will show the cube as the active link at the top. The next one on that list is the armature, and it will show the armature stuff. So if I mush these all down, you'll see that they connect from the cube to the armature to the motion actuator. Then also, on the same token, when I do the space bar, it will do the action on the cube. Okay? When you select more than one, I already went through that. That feature allows you to connect a sensor from one object to the controller of another one, and again to the actuator of yet another object. This is one of the key elements for group instancing and an advanced way of sharing logic bricks, which is covered in the end of this chapter. So we're going to get to more about this in the end of the chapter. Okay? Message system. If you found that cross-linking objects can easily become hard to keep track of, welcome to the team. Before getting desperate, make sure that you read about the elegant alternative presented by the message sensor and the message actuator. Be aware that if you decide for the messaging, if you decide or go for the messaging system, your events will always be delayed by one logic tick, since it will only trigger the sensor in the next logic loop. So when you add a message sensor to your say your cube, and you want to send something, you want to send move, okay, to your armature, okay, you're going to have a controller, okay, that says message. It receives a message. See, oh, actually, I'm sorry. I can't remember which way it is now. You send one to it, okay, so you say message, you say move. So when it receives a message to the armature to move, or the cube, say from the cube, okay, to the cube to move, okay, that will trigger along with the space bar that now this actuator can move and the action can play at the same time. Okay, so that's what that does. You can also do them in reverse. You can have this one sent to, from the cube and send it to a message to the armature to move. Okay, so there's different ways you could do this by using the messages. A lot of people like to use messages because they actually help a little bit more. So, but again, each logic tick, it's going to wait one logic tick before it fires this message. Okay? Before it fires this message back to the cube saying, hey, move. Okay? Alright, so, unlink. Okay, when you want to unlink these, okay, drag the mouse, holding the left mouse button, and the control key to use the unlink feature. So if you hit control key and you activate your left mouse, you can cut through everything if you want. Look, we're going to cut them all. So basically it creates a knife. So all you have to do is control, left mouse key, and it cuts the strings to it. Okay? Now if I switch over here, these are now disconnected. Okay? So if you just wanted to unlink them, you can. It's not that big of a deal. When you have one hooked up and you say, I didn't want to hook that one up. All you do is control, and as you see, I got this little line that I can do and I can even draw with until I let go. Once I let go of the left mouse key or the control key, it will automatically sever that. So as you see, okay, now this is just going to be with the control key. Okay, actually it's not the control key. As soon as you let off of the mouse, it automatically does it. So it's not control key, so I apologize for that. All right, let's see, what are we up to? We're up to 22 minutes. So expand and hide will be what we do next week. So let me switch over here so you can see what I'm talking about. If you are following along in the book, okay, that is going to be page 10. Expand, show, and hide is what we'll work on next week. But that's it for this week. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here at 22 minutes. I was trying to keep it within 15 minutes, but hey, it sometimes gets a little bit long-winded because, hey, I like to talk. I like to hear myself talk. Either which way. But I'm hopefully y'all catch a little bit more of how the logic system works. And we'll continue this on next week and finish up the logic brick idea, and we're going to move on to a lot of the stuff. We've still got move, states, and we're going to get into states. Those are important, so pay attention next week. Okay, some properties we're going to work on, the actual sensors, the header, basically telling everything about each one and how each one works. Okay, so we're going to leave it there at that, and until next week, till then.